As from the beginning, Ukraine can rely on the fact that Europe will remain the strongest and most steadfast partner. We all know that we can never match the sacrifice of the Ukrainian people, but what we can match is their stamina, their resolve, their staying power, and we can equip them with the means to defend themselves and to lead peace negotiations from a position of strength.
Well, look into her face. I see a mixture of desperation and moral hazard. The Europeans don't have the power to fight the Russian Federation. They could send an expedition corps of, let me say, 50,000 or 60,000 soldiers, and such a corps will be destroyed by hypersonic missiles in a week or two. So they have no power. On the other hand, moral hazard because the Europeans, in person of Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, stopped the negotiations in the beginning in spring, in March 2022. So this turns around the responsibility for many thousands Ukrainian dead soldiers. So the Europeans and the Americans as well refused to stop the war in the very beginning. So, and this is moral hazard and desperation because they cannot stop the negotiation process. They are not involved anymore.
And somebody who's also ironically not involved anymore is the Ukraine side, and kind of in lockstep with what Ursula von der Leyen was saying. You had Volodymyr Zelensky, who also went out and said, and this is a kind of a strange statement on a number of fronts here, but pay attention to what he says about, in light of all of these scandals that are just inflamed inside of the Ukraine leadership right now, about no one should profit from war.
War should not become a profitable business so that others would not want to repeat such actions. That is why we take principled positions on sanctions, on accountability for war crimes, on the legal status of our territories currently occupied by Russian forces, on Russian assets, and on the obligation of reconstruction. The aggressor must pay for the aggression. The stronger the world's united stance on these points, the more secure and lasting peace will be.
Yes, this is just propaganda in my eyes. It is interesting that Zelensky said nobody should profit from war, but he is one of the greatest war profiteers. According to military experts, 1/5 to 1/3 of all weapons deliveries to Ukraine are shipped to other places in the world. They don't come to the front line. They are reaching other conflict regions of the world. And the whole Ukrainian oligarchy is profiteering from this war. Also Zelensky privately and his companions. So this is a complete corrupt regime. It's a criminal regime. It's a dictatorship, a military dictatorship. And I know people in Kiev who told me, I am waiting for the Russians to come to get freed from this dictatorship of Zelensky. And for Zelensky, this is only a matter of survival. The only way to survive is to go on with the war. If Zelensky would agree to stop the war, he will be killed by his own security personnel, which is recruited by Galician right-wingers and fascists. And the problem will be, in the whole peace process, how to calm down these Ukrainian fascists. They are completely under weapons and they want to fight against Russia. And they are very ideological, and they will not stop fighting. That's the main point. So I think the only way to stop the fighting is to bring the whole regions, eastern and northern of the Dnieper River, into the Russian hands, because the Dnieper is a natural border. This is the only way to stop the fighting. And we are far away from this. But if it is not possible to cut a deal right now, the Russian army will go on occupying territories more and more west. So this is the step, and so Zelensky is getting weaker and weaker. He is in a very dangerous position because his only personal hope can be that American special forces will help him to come into another country. This is the only hope to survival for Zelensky.
There's certainly no hope that Zelensky's troops can turn things around on the battlefield, and that was really underscored about 36 hours ago by the chief of staff of the of the Russian army, General Gerasimov, when he laid out exactly for Putin how things are progressing on the front lines.
Comrade Supreme Commander-in-Chief, in accordance with the plan of the special military operation, the troops of the joint group are conducting an offensive along a broad front. The command of the Ukrainian armed forces continues unsuccessful attempts to unblock its encircled groups in the Kupiansk and Krasnoarmeysk directions and is seeking to halt our advance in the Krasnolimansk, Severodonetsk, Dnipropetrovsk, and Zaporizhia directions. Force Group North completed the liberation of the city of Vovchansk today. Furthermore, according to the General Staff's plan, retaliatory massive strikes against Ukrainian military-industrial facilities and the energy infrastructure that supports their operation are continuing. Supreme Commander-in-Chief, the formations and military units of the joint group of forces will continue to launch active offensive operations with the goal of completely liberating Donbass.
So from an independent position, I guess, if you will, you just talked about how Zelensky was talking about things, and you say, well, that's just pure propaganda. But let's look at that Russian side from that same lens and assess it. Is what Gerasimov was saying just for public consumption? Obviously, the cameras are rolling, so the intent is for people to hear that. But is that just words, or are the words matched with deeds on the ground?
I think Gerasimov is completely right. He is telling the truth. So the Russian troops are advancing. I already told that Pokrovsk, Krasnoarmeysk in the Russian version is in Russian hands. And this is a very important crossing of railways and streets. And on the whole front line, at a large scale, the Russian troops are advancing. And this means the Ukrainians have only the choice between stopping the war now and cutting a peace deal and agreeing to the American proposals, or to get into a much worse situation. And so the war will go on. The Russian side will not agree to a ceasefire because they have advantages on the battlefield. And the European side is discussing just about propaganda lies. That's the position.
And so that was what Gerasimov was saying to Putin. Putin had an interesting comment, I think it was yesterday, when he was talking about at that time, the Witkoff meeting before it happened, that Steve Witkoff was on his way over there. And he was saying that what they had seen so far was going back to, I think it was the Anchorage meeting where Putin and Trump personally spoke together, and what Putin apparently thought an agreement, that they had an understanding of where the conditions were, had kind of gone into a pause. But then he says, you know, this 28-point peace plan that Trump released, he said from his perspective, it's like the European side seems to be trying to sabotage that so that there won't be a peace. Here's how he put it.
Они же на стороне войны. И даже тогда, когда они пытаются якобы внести какие-то изменения в предложение Трампа, мы же это отчетливо видим. Все эти изменения направлены только на одно, на то, чтобы вообще заблокировать весь этот мирный процесс. Выдвинуть такие требования, которые для России являются абсолютно неприемлемыми, они это понимают, и тем самым свалить потом на Россию сворачивание этого мирного процесса. Вот в чем их цель. Мы это отчетливо видим.
So for anybody who may not have been able to read those words, I know they're pretty small on the screen there, but he's saying is this peace plan that the changes that the Europeans were making in the negotiations between the U.S. and Europe seem to be designed to undermine the process by inserting things that they knew that Russia, that their red lines that they wouldn't agree to. And he says, we see this clearly. Is that just Putin putting the spin on things, or does he have a point about what the Europeans are trying to do?
I think Putin is right. The Europeans have two goals. They want to go on with this war, and they want to bring in NATO troops into Ukraine, and they want to have the Americans in this war. And this is completely acceptable for both sides, the Americans and the Russians as well. But on the European side, they are losing ground, and they clearly don't play any role in this negotiation process. And Putin says clearly they cannot destroy the peace process right now. They have not the power to do so. And he is he's showing what the Europeans are intending to do. From my side, this is the wrong way. The Europeans don't play any matter right now. They brought themselves into this situation by completely subordinating themselves under the interests of the United States. But the interests of the United States changed. The interests of the hegemon changed. The Biden government tried to weaken Russia by fighting a war in Ukraine against Russia. And the Trump government makes very clear that it wants to cut a deal with Russia to fight the Chinese. And this is a different approach. And the Europeans cannot understand that. They could not understand that because they are waiting for another government in the United States. And the second point is the political survival of the European functional elites depends on the continuation of the war, because they brought their own countries in a dead-end street. Economically, they are close to bankruptcy, and they need the Russian assets. And when the bill will be shown to the European people, those European elites will be kicked in the garbage can of history.
So what would be the result economically if President Trump and his team finally say, okay, you know what, I'm tired of trying to get you guys on board. I'm trying to find a happy medium that everybody can agree to. I'm just going to agree to what I can agree to with Russia for our own interests, our own long-term interests, and we'll agree to whatever here. You guys are on your own. If you want to keep fighting this war, if you want to keep supporting this, you have at it, but you're going to do it completely without us. What would happen in that case within Europe?
For the Europeans, means the whole negotiation process. They are completely under American control, especially in a situation when American companies and Russian companies are reorganizing the gas delivery via Nord Stream, so they can control the European gas supply. And the second point is economic decline. They don't play any economic role anymore in the future. And European will be a row of failing states in the end of the show, a row of failing states. They will getting poorer and poorer, and I expect a lot of political crisis situations in Europe, demonstrations, protests of the people, and all that. Probably beginning in Ireland, I don't know. And
there was
German government. Yeah.
Sorry, there was some comment this morning from Mark Rutte, from the NATO Secretary General, that they want to try and keep Ukraine afloat through the year 2026 with an infusion of $90 billion, which subsequently Ursula von der Leyen also added was probably going to be funded by more debt. How is that going to work out economically? Forget about the negotiations for a second and whether this goes to an end, but how can they economically facilitate adding yet more debt? Will that not cause negative implications for the economy across the board?
Yes, it's only by more debts in the hope that the European side can get more collateral on Ukraine soil. But this is impossible. It is betting on the future. And it's a kind of Russian roulette. So it's just rhetoric, just telling stories.
So wait a minute. So let's say that they agree to this and they actually implement this new debt and they come up with this $90 billion based on a future hope of some kind of assets. But then Gerasimov's comments and Putin's statements turn out to be how it actually plays out, and Russia wins the war. Ergo, they don't have access to any of those hoped for assets. And now they're just saddled with this big old debt and a country that is now collapsed. What impact is that going to have on the economy of Europe?
They are destroying their own economies by more debts. That's clear for me. But I have to say, I'm representing a minority position. And the politicians of Germany and France and the UK are trying to lie to their own people on this. And the majority is believing these lies, in these lies. That's the problem. It's just propaganda. And those politicians know they are coming to an end. And they will be held responsible for that, what they have done in Ukraine. About 2 million dead people. And I think partly these politicians have to fear criminal prosecution.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement. Let's look at Germany in particular here on the military aspect, because there's also been information out here in recent days that Germany wants to become the new military power on the continent, and they want to increase their military size. They want to bring back a draft. They want to make plans in a certain sense for a future conflict with Russia. What can you tell us about what the Germans are actually doing militarily?
So Germany's economy is in full decline, and the politicians have the strategy to set their hopes into the military-industrial complex to save a lot of jobs for the near future. But in the end, these are consumptive investments. That doesn't help the country. We need new schools, we need new streets, we have to invest in infrastructure, in education and all that. And so this is the wrong way from my side. It helps for some years, but it shows that every war is not only a war against the foreign enemy. Every war is also a class war to intensify the exploitation of the middle class. And what we see right now in Germany is a kind of exploitation of the middle class for transferring the financial resources to the military-industrial complex in Europe, but especially in the United States. That's the process.